My name is Katie Roche, and I met Amy at the American Library Association conference in 2023, and Amy noticed my badge that said Iowa City Public Library on it, where I work as the director of the Iowa City Public Library Friends Foundation. And surrounded by her extensive collection of comics and works, she told me that she spent her formative years here in Iowa City, attending school here as a pretty shy kid who found herself fighting for her rights and the rights of other young girl athletes. Amy's story of becoming the artist we now know is one of resilience, determination, and grit. Thank you to all the supporters of the Iowa City Public Library Friends Foundation for helping to make Amy's visit possible today. And please join me in welcoming Amy Chu.
Wow, okay, can you all see me over here? I feel like I should, I don't know, anyway. We'll sort of do this, because I also have a few slides to show you, because I think that'll be more fun, too. First of all, I'm so happy to see new people, but also people I haven't seen for, dare I say, decades. I was West High, class of 1985. Woohoo, right? Okay, and both my brothers also went to West High, class of 86 and 84. And so it's so nice to be back here and under these circumstances, because let's just say, as an incredibly shy kid, okay, obviously I've gotten over it, by the way, right? But I was so shy, and I really have to wonder if my classmates even remember me, because it was so hard to talk in class when you're shy, right? And like I said, obviously I got over this with a lot of practice, because I was also counting, I have done 158 Comic-Cons since then, in the last 10 years, okay, so only in the last 10 years, in which every con I do, I will do some form of workshop or something, because what I have found is that comics is a great medium, but also I also want to support the libraries, because the library is really where I found, you know, this was my safe space. This is where I spent most of my time, even in college. That was my work study, you know. That's how I made money, is shelving books and being in my safe space. The libraries are very important to me, and it should be important to you too, right? To support the libraries. But for me, it's also a way of reaching out and to say that, okay, yes, I you know, it sounds great, right? I fought for sports rights, and now I've written 28 graphic novels for Marvel and DC. And this is only the last 10 years, right? Because you can do the math, right? Class of 85. I only started doing this when I was a mom with 2 young kids when I was 44, and I started doing it then. And so there's a major career shift, right? Major career shift. I was doing just fine as a, quite frankly, a management consultant, wonk, you know, I was doing business development, I was doing biotech, had no idea that I could actually write. But like all things, I had no idea I could speak either. This was all, in other words, if I can do it, you can do it, whether it's your future self or you as a kid. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, this is kind of my origin story, if I can figure out how to, right? That the theme here, you can be anything. This is the multiverse. I could easily still be here in Iowa City. In fact, there's probably a version of me that is still here. Can you hear me okay? I don't know if you can hear me okay, right? They're filming it. In another universe, there's a version of me that's still in Iowa City, right? There's another version of me that's doing perfectly okay, doing another PowerPoint, talking about net present value of some failing biotech startup for which I have to raise $2 million and will never do that. That was my past self, right? What really happened, and some of you may be wondering, well, how did this all happen? And how does this relate to my 16-year-old self in Iowa City? But again, I would not have considered myself at that time to be a real radical activist, you know what I mean? It was a very difficult time where I had just moved to Iowa from California, 1980, and again, it's horrifying being the new kid and also being shy, and quite frankly, you know, Iowa City in 1980 was not terribly diverse, right? And being the new kid and being super shy, Chinese American, My parents were also not very outgoing, so we were kind of sheltered. And, but there's one thing that I did do. This is not part of the presentation because I don't normally talk about it. It's a little weird. Normally I just talk about comics, but it is related. In that 1980, we moved here, and I had always played soccer because in college, in California, everyone plays. Whether you're a girl or boy or anything, you play soccer because that's just the thing. And I wouldn't say I'm like the most amazing player, but it's one thing I can do aside from being a total geek, because I was also on the chess team. Totally the only girl on the chess team, of course, right? I was also the only girl that played D&D back then, so it was super uncool. I did all the uncool things. And I was playing soccer on the Iowa City, does anyone remember the Iowa City Kickers? Oh, are they still around? Oh my God. So I was one of the very first, I may have been the first girl on the Iowa City Kickers then. There's another girl too, I think she moved away, but really, that was it. And in West High had only just started their first soccer team. And it was the boys' team, right? But it was still the same guys, so it seemed natural at that time, logical. And the coach was actually all for it, because I'm a lefty, so he needed a left wing. And so he's like, no, you can try out totally. And so I tried out, I made the team, the JV team. Some of you may still remember this, I don't know. But anyway, I was part of that team until I got called into the principal's office, which is horrifying, by the way, because, right, I'm such a geek. You never get called in the principal's office. I'm really shy and a really good girl. I do all my homework, never get in any trouble. And I get called into the principal's office, and I get told that I'm not allowed to play, right? And I'm like, well, that's weird because I'm nerdy enough that I know what Title IX says. And Title IX says, are we not a public school? Am I not allowed to play unless you set up a girls' team? And the response was, it doesn't work like that. It's for your own protection. I was like, what protection? I've been playing with these guys for like, what, 3-4 years now? And Coach Zimmerman, in fact, I don't know if Phil Mears is here. So actually, so Phil, can you stand up? This is Phil Mears, who is the attorney that represented me back in 1983. They said, yeah, no, there's a case here, right? That, in fact, you can take this to court. And before I knew it, it was on the front page of the Press Citizen. Amy Chu sues school district. I was so mortified, because, you know, there's a big difference between, especially now, if you're 16, you already got your social media in place, and you got all your people lined up. I was 16 when there's none of that. I was horrified. It was embarrassing. I didn't really know what this all meant, but I know what was right. And this does get into the multiverse, by the way, right? In that, of course I won, right, with Philip's wonderful, I don't know what you call it. I still have, my dad gifted me the typewritten brief, I guess what it is. We won, but Cedar Rapids decided to fight it. The Cedar Rapids school, the soccer coach was like, no girl is going to play my boys on the field. So we had to go back to court again to say, you can't just do that. You either play or you forfeit. They chose to forfeit, by the way. But once again, my humiliation was complete because he made sure he called all the press to make sure that as soon as I stepped foot on the field, he would make sure everyone saw the point that he was trying to make. And so he pulled his kids off the field. This was also close to prom season. It was really awful. Right? Because I couldn't even get a prom date. This was the worst of everything. Anyway, so let's just say my time in Iowa City was kind of fraught, you know, even though I won. And this is what happened, by the way, right? What happened was victory was complete because as soon as we won, then the school district, why don't we set up a girls' team? It's like, why didn't you do that to begin with? Because it was oversubscribed, right? It was like, it was great, actually, my senior year. I got to be captain, even though I'm not captain material because I still could not talk in public, right? This only happened in college, by the way. In college, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I actually do have to talk in public. And so all of this happened. That was 1983. And I went to college. I went away to college. And fast forward again, right, to how did I get into comics? Well, from that experience, let's just put it this way. Biotech, pharma was not doing great. I was doing my thing. I had 2 kids. I'm like, what do I have to lose? One of my friends, her name was Georgia. She wanted to start a comic book company. I'm like, you know, I know business. You write, I'll figure out how to run the business. So Georgia was like, okay, but it's a little different from biotech pharma. I'm like, maybe. She's like, take a writing class. So this is what happened, right? I'm like, why not? Because at this stage, I have 2 young kids. I'm still trying to do different things. Why not just take this random class, even though I'm not a writer? I am a PowerPoint writer. I've been trained for years because at this point I'm 44. I've done 20 years of PowerPoint writing. I'm your person. You can argue whether that's creative fiction or not, right? But I know how to do that, but I'm not a creative writer. Anyway, I signed up for this class for writing comics. And lo and behold, I show up. It was about 50-50 whether I was going to do this or not. But it was cheap enough, and it was online. It's 12 guys and me. And these 12 guys are already arguing about who would win in a fight. And I'm like, I don't even know any of these characters. And it was quite obvious I did not fit in, okay? They were arguing about Martian Manhunter, by the way. Does anyone know Martian Manhunter? Yes, you're all like, and I'm like, who the heck is Martian Manhunter? So I'm like, Wikipedia everything. But the point is not your extensive knowledge about who Martian Manhunter is, right? It's about writing the script. So I'm like, I'm a good student, I'll write the script. And the instructor is a Marvel editor. He's an ex-Marvel editor. So the next class, he's like, let's talk about Amy's script. I'm like, hold on, I'm really just an auditor here. I'm not really. He's like, first of all, I finished it and no one else did on time. And when you're getting an assignment, and this is true for almost anything, right? But also, especially in comics, it's like journalism. You only get a certain number of pages to write your story. Some of you went through my workshop this afternoon, where I said 4 pages. You don't get to write 20 pages or 3 pages. The assignment is 4 pages, right? And so I did the assignment. So he's like, let's talk about it. But it's actually really good, which was a revelation to me, okay? Because I never thought I could write fiction. And don't forget, most of these guys have been reading comics for years. I hadn't really read anything. I'm a mom. Now I'm the weird mom, by the way. Yeah, so it was like completely, but remember back to when I was doing the soccer thing, is when you tell me I can't do something because of my gender, that is exactly the wrong trigger for me at this point, okay? So these guys are like, yeah, but girls don't really read comics, especially write them, so what's your deal? And I'm like, oh, is that what this is about, okay? So this became okay, I see what this is about. I'm gonna prove that it's not about what gender you are or anything, or about your knowledge of Martian Manhunter, which I fully appreciate now. I know a little bit more about Martian Manhunter now, but that's not the point. The point is anyone should be able to do whatever they want. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna show these guys, because they were making fun of me. It's like, well, I don't really know who Deadpool was. This was 2012, and I'm like, I don't really know who Deadpool is, but I take exception to your tone that you don't think I can write Deadpool because I'm a woman. So then it became my mission. I'm like, okay, I know enough where I'm like, how do I get to write Deadpool? So all of this was just to spite everybody, to show that, in fact, and I did. 5 years later, I did write Deadpool, and some of you have. I actually have 1 copy left here. Oh, wait, let me show you. My Deadpool. That took me 5 years. I got the Deadpool byline, and yeah, so obviously I overshot. Like I said, I was really just trying to prove a point. I went well past that with 28 issues. But the moral of the story is, don't say that to anybody. You can't do something because of your gender, okay? Because then you create monsters like me, okay? Where I'm trying to prove a point. And not only that, I drag my kids into it too. So they actually proofread, they help me co-write. In fact, my 20-year-old now has enough pro credits to be pro status at San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con. So you create a whole succession of monsters when you sort of do these things where you say, you can't do this because of who you are, okay? And so now I'm living proof here to say, in the multiverse, this version of me was really just born out of spite to say, if you tell me I can't do this, and to myself too, where it's like, I still can't believe I'm doing this because I never thought I would be a creative person, right? But it all goes back to the trigger of, when you create an environment for somebody and you yourself, I think at some point, easily I could have been like, what the heck am I doing, right? Sometimes things are set in motion, like with Philip Mears already, the wheels are set in motion, right? That this brief is gonna go ahead and I'm suing the school district before I even knew it, okay? Still can't believe I did that. It sounds great, it's like I was so sassy as a 16-year-old and so aware of my rights. That's not actually the truth. In the same way is, I never fully expected to write Deadpool, right? But I had to create the conditions where I could write Deadpool, and I did. And I wrote Iron Man, I've written Wonder Woman, the only character I have not really written is Superman or, I've written Spider-Man. So Iron Man, right? So I am the first, not even just female, I am the first MIT graduate to write Iron Man. So, I go for these things just to prove a point that you can do these things. So that's a little bit of where I am, right? Back to, some of you probably have kids or are thinking, what does one have to do to write Deadpool? And I would say, none of this, okay? Why did I go and get a degree from Wellesley College in East Asian Studies, architecture from MIT, and yes, I also have an MBA from Harvard Business School. I am a huge hit at reunions, let me tell you, okay? But I didn't have to do any of this. But on the other hand, the truth is too, I did, because almost everything that I learned, and I guess what I'm trying to impart to you is that the things that we do create who we are today. And when people say, oh my gosh, you must have wanted to do this all your life, and I'm sorry to be a downer to say, no, actually not. But what's more important to me is, and it's all about finding your passion, right? Finding your passion. This was never my passion. I'm not saying it's not my passion now, but me as a 56-year-old now, I can do this now, but I could not have done this when I was 25. I didn't want to do it when I was 25, nor was I ready, okay? This is literally the culmination. Everything I've done, everything I learned in school, everything I learned in life has created this kind of perfect storm of me being able to share Deadpool with you all now, or to write, I'm in the middle, you'll see this, I'm in the middle of writing the Borderlands graphic novel. So, do I know Borderlands? No, but, nothing like a weekend won't fix of playing a game that you can do these things. Basically, it's very easy to say, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, this is not me, You have to kind of force yourself out of your comfort zone, which is where I am now. I'm completely outside my comfort zone, even talking with you. I'm a fake extrovert. This is literally, again, 150 Comic-Cons of speaking, so now I do feel comfortable doing this. Everything takes practice, which is what I'm saying is that you literally can do what I'm doing. How good you will be, I don't know, but it's kind of like sports, right? Anyone can play basketball if you practice, but are you going to be NBA level? Who knows, right? But you won't know till you try. So I certainly know enough where I understand everything I do is a craft. Everything I've done, I've leveraged. You'd be surprised how much, I got some CRISPR genetic engineering technology into my first book, Poison Ivy. I pull stuff out. I do whatever I need to do to make it good. But all that comes from who I was starting when I was 16 here, learning how to do, right? It's just all this stuff, right? So again, this is all the stuff I work. I've literally written Rick and Morty. How crazy is that? When the editors say, hey, do you want to write Rick and Morty? So the right answer is, of course, hell yeah. And then I had to go back and watch it because I don't know anything about Rick and Morty, right? The point is never to say, well, I just can't do it, I don't know enough, right? To I will do it and I will figure out how to do it, right? I will do comics, even if it kills me, and it's killing me right now, okay? But, outside my comfort zone. It's very also easy to say that, as my kids do, I think sometimes they're embarrassed about me, I think, because I'm doing the weird mom stuff. But now it's cool because all their peers are like, wait, your mom does what? And now it's suddenly cool. So that's great. I'm accepting that, right? I'm going to shift a little bit because I'm also not sure. How many of you actually know how comics are made? No? I'm going to do you do. Tell me, like, how are comics made? Like these people, right? This is super important, thank you. Comics is actually a team. You may think about it as just one person, but the truth is, at least at this level, you need a bunch of people, and that's exactly the correct answer. That first of all, I don't draw, by the way. Somebody may think that we draw, but at this point, let me put on my MBA hat. It's really actually technical, specialized, right? We are actually an assembly line operation. For your Marvel and DC comics to come out every 30 days, I got to pump out a script in 1 week. The artist, which is a penciler or the inker, needs to be able to do 20 pencil pages in 20 days, essentially. Meanwhile, the inker's coming in, the colorist is coming in, and the letter's coming in, and hopefully it's coming back to me so I can fix whatever needs to be fixed. And meanwhile, there's an editor who's also in charge of 10 other books, fighting fires just to get that thing out to the printer. So that gives you any idea. It's crazy business, okay? So hopefully appreciate, right? Because there's a couple local people here who do this. Does anyone know Phil Hester, by the way? I was hoping Phil would be here. Phil is an amazing artist. We are of the same vintage, but he started literally like 25 years earlier than me. And he's a wonderful artist. And the only thing that we have worked on sort of together, he did the cover on a Red Sonja that I did. Okay, so I did 28 issues of Red Sonja. Once again, I don't really know Red Sonja, but I know Red Sonja now. I did 18 issues of Kiss for Gene Simmons. I know. I was like, I don't even know who you guys are really. I'm still not sure which guy is which, right? But if you are going to hire me, because this is my business background, if you're going to hire me to do it, I'll figure it out, right? Because what is it that Kiss, do we have any Kiss fans here? Kiss is, like it or not, part of the American cultural DNA. And the one thing about Kiss I realize is it's usually people's first concert experience, right? So I'm like, let me just work on that. And also, everyone knows that Gene Simmons does not have a small ego, right? So if I'm pitching, this is the business background. If I'm going to pitch to Gene Simmons, what is he going to want to hear? He's going to want to hear a future where Kiss is the universe. So that was my pitch, and I got the job. So all that stuff, right? So I have the benefit of now even having comics about myself. This actually appeared in the MIT Alumni Review, drawn by one of my very, very favorite artists, because they asked me, who do you want to draw you? And it's Francesco Francavilla, a really lovely friend who's done amazing work. So, all these things so I do like this multiverse me, This is like kind of like a very positive outcome of having, my idols actually draw part of my story. But it is a story that's still in flux, right? I'm doing different things, and I have decided that I need to draw. I do need to draw. So I'm starting to learn to draw because that's taking myself out of the comfort zone. I think that part of what we need to do as human beings is to keep pushing yourself to do different things. And it's very easy, especially for some of us, at a certain age to say, okay, I'm done, right? Which is fine. If you're done, you're done. But there's always new things that why not? Just go ahead and push yourself. Like I said, I'm now 56. I started when I was 44. I'm going to start drawing now. I think I still got a good 10 years before maybe, right? Who knows what happens to me, right? Hopefully Social Security will kick in too, because I may not do as well drawing. Drawing's a whole nother thing. But, right, when we take stock of where we've gone, and also knowing yourself well enough of what your triggers are, this whole thing of starting in Iowa City as somebody who didn't really know anything, but, right, it was like, why am I not allowed to play soccer with the boys, right? Why are people saying that's weird that I write comics now? So I'm still doing that. Now, by the way, there's a lot more women in comics. I don't want to say it's 50-50, but certainly in children's, YA, and indie comics, women are at least 50% represented, and also on the editorial staff. Marvel and DC, I reckon, are about 50% women now on the editorial side, okay? The other thing that's interesting, right, so we're making gains on everything, not just soccer and sports, because, right, watching the Olympics, okay? In comics, even retailers, women-owned stores, and then, people like me who are still a little crazy, okay, trying to prove a point. So all that, right? I actually just made a comic with some people where I don't normally draw, but I forced myself to draw 4 pages of, you can come up and see this later, right? My horribly crude, it's very easy to say, okay, I don't want to show anybody, right? But at some point, you need to realize there's always people who are better than you. There's always people who are worse than you. And you know what? To make myself feel better sometimes, because I still don't believe that I'm a writer, because I didn't start off that way. I still have that, imposter syndrome. That to make myself feel better, I'll go and get some crappy comics. I'll go to Daydreams. Go find, get some recommendations for poorly done comics, and you will feel great about yourself. Because if that stuff got printed, you can do better than that. So almost everything I do, you know what? I can do just as good, if not better. To the point where I was I was with Dylan Jacobson over at Des Moines Con. There's Dylan back there. And I talked myself out of a lot of things. And my latest book is Carmilla, the First Vampire. I like doing different things, by the way. I don't consider myself a genre writer. That was a horror book. It won the Bram Stoker Award literally while I was at Des Moines Con. And somebody said, hey, you just won this award. I'm like, no, that cannot be possible, because I'm not a horror writer. And obviously, I'm not at the award ceremony that I didn't know anything about, because it's like for Stephen King people, right? But it turns out that I did indeed win the award, because, the award showed up by FedEx. It's like this huge award that Junji Ito was supposed to win. I beat out Junji Ito for that award. So sometimes you just have to accept it, even though my 16-year-old was like, I don't think so. I think there's a mistake, because Junji Ito is supposed to win. How could I win? So, your kids are always the reality check on things, by the way. I do have my kids, and this is another thing. If you're worried about children or what your direction should be, just let them do whatever they want. Let them explore. I do that, but at the same time, I say, you got to proofread my script because it's due in 2 hours. Forget your homework. I need you to proofread this. So they have a different view on all these things, where they literally say, we don't really read comics. I'm like, you have actually helped me co-write comics. What are you talking about, right? Let them try new things. Stop worrying about what is my passion, right? Because this was never my passion. Literally just try things, and maybe it works out for you, as it did for me, right? This is kind of where I am now. And maybe the next iteration of myself will be, I don't know, it's going to have to be indie comics, because I'm really bad at perspective and anatomy and all these things that you're supposed to learn. But maybe that's going to be my next iteration. So things change, right? Can I take question? How? Yeah? Oh, yes.
So I'm really curious. You mentioned that there are projects that you've taken on where you haven't been familiar with the characters, the IP. What does your research for that look like then?
Good question. Literally, panic.
She'll want me to repeat the question.
Oh, okay.
I'm even a staff person. I should know better.
You have one job to do.
I know. I fail it. Sorry, I'll repeat my question. So you talked about getting projects where you're unfamiliar with characters or IP, and I was just curious what the research looks like before you tackle it.
Yeah, so it's always panic, by the way. My first story from DC was actually a Wonder Woman. They asked me to pitch for Wonder Woman, and like that's huge panic right there because there is.
Stop that noise.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
And first of all, you don't have time to research 80 years of Wonder Woman. So what do, right? What's most important is not every single fact about that IP, is understanding what is the essence of that IP, the intellectual property of those characters. If I'm gonna write Wonder Woman, why do people like Wonder Woman and what makes Wonder Woman tick? That's the most important thing. Not what she did back in 1976 in issue whatever, right? It's more important, do I get this, right? And for the most part, that's almost all my research is not is some fan gonna get me on a certain factoid, right? It's more, am I getting the essence of what people love about that character? Like Kiss. What do people love about Kiss? I should also say, what do people hate about things, but I don't focus that way, right? But what makes this work and why it's not working? For me, okay, because again, I come out of business, so I think of myself as a turnaround person. Why is Green Hornet not working, okay? So when I took over Green Hornet, I was like, okay, what's going on? Kevin Smith, sorry. It doesn't work as funny, right? Green Hornet doesn't work as funny. You can have funny other characters, but Green Hornet himself, right? That's like Batman, okay? So these are the things we had to figure out. What is you as the reader, what do you need? What are you gonna plunk money down? What are you gonna pay daydreams, right? It's like the comics are not cheap, right? They're still gonna be $3, $4, $5. You're gonna spend that money. What's gonna make you happy? So I really focus, so that's my business side saying. There are gonna be people like, how do you deal with editors telling you what to do? I was like, that's literally their job, okay? They hired you. Your job, but they hired you believing you can deliver, okay? And they don't actually want to get involved. Most of them do not. A good editor hired you so you can do what they believe they hired you to do. In my case, it was like, let's try to fix up Green Hornet. I'm like, Green Hornet needs to get out of this country. He's got a buttload of money. Why isn't he flying around? Let's take him to Istanbul. Let's blow up cars in Istanbul. That's what you want, right? So when we talk about research, that's what I do. I got to figure out what is it you want, but also what's cool. This is the thing. My job is to make up cool stuff. How great is that? But not to know every single detail so that when I get stuck in some trivia contest, I don't do trivia contests because I would still lose out in the Martian Manhunter thing, right? How to break in? Nobody's going to ask, how do you break in? You know, I also did animation too. I'm in the Writers Guild. I did 2 seasons of Netflix, Dota, Dragon's Blood. Did anyone watch that?
Hi, sorry, I came a little late. In animation, you do the traditional styles or you do the digital styles with programs?
Oh, okay. So first of all, I'm the writer. So, but almost everything now is digital. Even in, okay, so in comics, by the way, okay, so I don't mind talking a little bit about this because how many artists are here? Do you have artists? Yeah? Okay, digital is faster for most artists, but especially, let's say you're the artist on Wonder Woman, guess what? You're probably gonna wanna do it old school because then you can sell the art for more, okay? If you're doing digital, you usually can't do anything with it, it's digital. But if you drew an awesome Wonder Woman cover, you can now flip that cover for, who knows, at least $1,000, maybe several $1,000s. If you chose to go digital, maybe it was faster, and maybe you could fix things up. These are all economic decisions that people make, okay? But for the most part, almost everything is moving towards digital, especially coloring, okay? I mentioned that my friend Janet, I did 2 books with. She's one of the few people that still does everything by hand. She colors by hand. She inks by hand. And get this, she even decoupages the final pages. I don't know who does that. You know, it's not an economic decision on her part. She literally does it for the art, right? So in animation, everything is digital because stuff happens, especially Netflix. Changes happen, and you need to be able to make those changes quickly.
Could I ask you a little question about your relationship between the writing and the storyboard and the final layout? Do you storyboard? Do you lay things out for them to understand how the story might flow on the page?
Okay, I fully encourage those of you who are writers and not artists to storyboard because it forces you to think like an artist. I don't do that anymore because my scripts are the storyboard. And there is a standard, by the way. There is a standard. You write it in a format. So it's not like I just kind of like, I come up with this idea and boom. I can do that with friends, but especially if you're working for Marvel or DC, they want a fully formatted script that literally says, page 1, panel 1, establishing shot, Iowa City, daytime, room, full of people kind of stuff. That's my job to do it. I'm responsible for pacing, 5 panels per page, 7 panels per page. That's my job as a writer, to control the time, control the dialogue, and also tell the artist what to draw. That is actually my job, to say, now, my job is not to say, yeah, also, can you make that a Dutch angle and make sure that people are wearing this or that, right? I mean, I just need to be able to tell the artist, this is a mood, this is what it kind of looks like. Go ahead and, whatever you want to do, but the details and stuff like that, that's their job. There's a certain point where you're micromanaging. And if you're a new writer, don't do that. I teach enough. I teach also the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, and I teach at the Kubert School. And all the new non-artists tend to do that. They'll be like, yes, and in the back is a pink Post-it that has nothing to do with anything. It's like, who cares about that? No one cares about that. The artists I teach to write are the exact opposite, where they're actually trying to write as if they're drawing, right? It's so interesting to see how people do things, right? But the bottom line is that what my job is, and in animation and also comics, is that I am producing the blueprint for the story. It's literally the story, the pacing, the number of pages, what happens, who are the characters. But the other things about the details of what color t-shirt are you wearing, that really should be up to the artist and the colorist, unless I have a very specific objective, like red is the color of this particular gang sign. I don't know, right? I'm just making stuff up where it does make a difference in the story. But as a writer, your job in particular is to set the tone. Is this a happy room? Hopefully this is a happy room or a curious room, right? But that's more important. And it's the thing that I see most often in new scripts that people forget about. They're trying to tell a story from plot. And it's not the plot that drives a good story. It's the emotion that drives the story. What makes a good story is that we're invested in what happens next because we care about the characters, not because this is such a cool plot, right? We know this because we consume so much media that it's only because you care about the characters, not really what that weird little plot detail was, right? We don't care about plot. In fact, if you go back and think about all the stuff you love, do you even remember all the plot? You remember the relationships between the characters and whether you loved or you hated those characters. And that's your job as a writer to set that. If you don't do that, you're not as good of a writer as you thought, right? It's not the plot. Nobody ever cared about my plots, by the way. And I care about my plots. The editor somewhat cares about the plots. But if you don't have the characters down, then, you might as well be doing PowerPoint.
Does anyone else have a question?
So with writing, how do you write by hand, or do you do it with computers, or what's the setup for that?
Okay. So I do a bunch of different things. Remember, I started 12 years ago when my kids were also playing soccer. So I write on the fly. So I write on my phone. I have a cloud app. I write on my laptop. I write wherever I can, because this is the reality of anything these days. We all multitask. Because some of you are thinking, well, how do I do this? Nobody has to quit their day job, by the way, okay? I have some people who think, oh, I want to do this thing. Let me just quit my job, sell everything, and go sail across the world. You don't need to do that. Just start writing, literally on the notes app on your phone, and just start writing. I also, to be honest, you're asking a question where I have to think a little bit. I literally also carry a notebook. Well, I'll start writing and I'll start outlining in pen. At a certain point, I may move to the notebook, and then I'll move to the laptop, and the final document, which will be not, you don't have to use, what is it called, a Final Draft or any fancy software. Literally Google Docs or Word doc is all you need. The main thing, as with anything, is you actually just have to finish it. It's very easy to get caught up in what software should I use or whatever. It's literally, and here's the key, you don't need to be a perfectionist. You're not rewarded for perfection, by the way, because it'll never be perfect. It's literally just get it done. Get it done to the point where you're not horribly embarrassed, and even if you are embarrassed, just send it in. You know, that's my life, right? Because I'm actually overdue on another another script where I need to polish, and there's a tendency. It's like homework. You really should turn it in on time, right? And I'm going to say this to all the students here: do your homework, turn it in on time, even if it's crap. And then you let a couple days go by where you fix it, and then you go tell your teacher, hey, you know what, I sent you the wrong version. I do this with editors all the time. This is the real version. What are they gonna say, right?
We have another question for you.
You like an artist who probably have this problem like every artist. What do you make like a tip or something for artists when they have this block artist? You cannot make nothing else.
Good question. We're talking about artist block or writer's block, or the blank page problem. And what I'm going to say about this, because I can say this with some authority because I never thought I would be a writer or anything like that. Well, first of all, if you have a deadline and there's a paycheck attached, suddenly that problem goes away. It really is true. I'm not saying that it doesn't always completely go away. But usually, if you are blocked, and this is my experience, there's something wrong with the story. I don't really 100% believe in writer's block, okay? I do believe in the distraction of the refrigerator, right? Because you're working at home and you're like, oh, well, it's not like anything changed in the refrigerator, right? But you keep going back and checking to see what's in there. That's a real problem. The writer's block problem is usually because, I will say this at least for myself, is usually because I was so in love with a particular scene, I'm trying to make it work around that, and now it's not working anymore, okay? And that's the block. What I usually do is, I'm a big fan of Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go forces me to go outside. You don't have to download Pokemon Go, but it forces me to go outside, and there's like 3 stops. I'll walk to each stop, and while I'm doing that, because Pokemon Go, frankly, is mindless, right? So you have to trick your brain into doing something else and let the back part of your brain figure out what the problem is. So by the time you walk back, something shakes loose and say, oh, you know, it's because that Green Hornet scene in Istanbul was super cool, but it makes no sense, right? So what we do is I learned this when I was in the writer's room for Dota. The guy who was the showrunner, he did the first X-Men, First Class. He also wrote the Sarah Connor Chronicles. You want to watch that? He's a very experienced showrunner. He called it story jail. The thing that's not working, don't kill it. Put it in story jail. Just cut and paste, put it at the bottom of the script, and try again without that scene. Even though it was a cool scene, we don't have to kill it. Maybe we can bring it in another episode. Take that out and see if that's what's going to fix things, okay? And it's true. That's actually half the time works really well because we want to make, I just told you, don't get caught up with plot, but we still have to focus. If something is not working, you know as the reader or the viewer, it doesn't make sense and it takes you out of the story. So you gotta take it out yourself, try it again, and see if that fixes your block.
No worries.
After a while, formulaic. How do you
That's a
How
good
do you
question.
keep that going, or do you feel like the Greeks?
Yeah.
People come to the theater to see a story they already know about, but to see it performed in a different way.
How do you keep things fresh without being tropey or whatever? And again, that's the difference between being a better writer and a tropey writer. Is you got to outguess yourself. It seems to. I do this all the time. Where so first of all, certain things work because they work, right? We look for that, especially in certain things like romance and horror, the jump scare. There are structures, especially in genre fiction, that work, but you can always keep it fresh by not doing, I mean, we're never original, by the way. There's always some version that's already been done. Your job is to make it slightly fresher by doing different things, right? Vampires. Vampires have been done to death, okay? So my current book, Carmilla, it's a story a lot of people know, but I set it in 1995 in New York City, Chinatown. That I know no one's done, right? Still vampire, still a lot of, I don't want to call it tropey, because you're like, okay, so there's a story here. There's a vampire killing people, okay? The part where you're asking is, it is your job to be creative about it and to come up with some new angle that people hopefully will like, right? This gets back to research too, by the way. It's just keep Googling. It's shocking to me how many people will come up with something. I'm like, oh, because it's also in your DNA. What you watch, you're regurgitating out there. And it's like, oh, that's Game of Thrones. Did you know that was Game of Thrones? You know, that kind of thing. But also, names of characters, always Google every name of your characters, and you'll find it already existed somewhere else. But you know what I do? I add a couple new vowels, a couple new consonants. You know, you gotta outguess yourself sometimes, right? And do things like that. So there is an element of that to keep it fresh, but also recognizing you don't have to reinvent the genre. There's something that we like about that. We like Bridgerton, right? We like certain things because it gives us what we need. So give people what they need, but with the extra, whatever it is. It's like cooking, right? It's like cooking and baking. You do the basic, but you throw in a little extra, whatever it is.
I'm going to ask you another question. I'm really curious about when you are given an assignment, how much instruction you're given.
Depends on the franchise, depends on the editor. Usually almost none. Usually almost none. For comics, when you get into anything involving more money, suddenly there's a lot more direction, okay? Anything that's involving transmedia, right? Let's just say Borderlands, because the movie was coming out. Suddenly there's wait, you can do this, but you can't do that. But for anything I'm doing, which is a short, if I'm doing a short story for DC or Marvel, almost always there is no strings attached. They may say something like, okay, but if you're thinking about using Nightwing, we can't use Nightwing. They'll tell you right off the bat for something like that. Where I tend to get more direction sometimes, which I try to avoid, is usually a young editor who wanted to be a writer, but could not be a writer, and now they're an editor. So you want to avoid that situation, right? Because it's kind of like, why don't you just write it, you know? But if they're hiring you to do your job, you do your job, right? The direction part is sometimes, like right now, I'm not supposed to talk about this. I'm doing a third book for something. The editor is giving me, first of all, she's been working as an editor since the 90s. She founded Vertigo. Her notes are on point. If she gives me notes, I'm going to take those notes almost always because she's my first reader. So I want that. And her perspective, she doesn't understand something. If she doesn't understand it, I also run it by my kids. If they don't understand it, then I know there's something wrong, right? And they're not shy about saying that too. They're like, I don't get it, right? Kids don't spare your feelings. So they're a great first reader. Who are not great are, let's say, your loved one, your partner, your parent. You're not great as your first reader because they're either going to say, that's awesome, honey. And it's like, it's not the case. It's never, right? Yeah, your kids are great. A real editor is also very useful. Highly recommend, right? It's very hard to self-edit, okay? So again, this is when a editor is good because they will be the ones that tell you, you know, it's a little tropey. They'll probably say it in a better way than that, right? But yeah, pretty much.
I have one more question, and we'll see if anyone else has questions. I'm curious.
there's a
Do you have a
question
question
all
back
the way
here? Oh, great. Yes. Nougat. If folks don't know, this young artist back here is an artist that worked with the library on designing a bag that's available in our bookstore upstairs and created a character that advocates for intellectual freedom and against censorship. So pretty cool stuff. This is Nougat.
Hello. I wanted to ask about so since you're a writer and you've worked with like Marvel and DC and stuff like that, I've like watched all of the X-Men movies for the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie that just came out, and I noticed that like there's so many different angles you could take with like that kind of universe,